Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Acidic Alex, and as you can see, I got shafted on Magneto's potential, and I also got shafted by not getting any more blast books after an extra day of farming for magic. So instead, we're going to be ranking all 8 of the existing winter holiday either paywall or full crystal cost uniforms, going all the way back to 2019 with Deadpool and Gwenpool to today, 2022, where we have the Magic and Magneto costumes, and we'll be talking about each one of them individually because there are 8 of them. There's not that many, so we can sort of take it a little bit more slowly, but we're basically ranking them in one of 3 categories. Meta, which is kind of self-explanatory, but it means that they are very useful for at least one game mode. They're very competitively good for at least one game mode. Useful, which means they're not competitively good for one game mode, but they can still be used in content and like useful. And then expired, which basically means they suck. And there's no surprise here that some of the uniforms are definitely in the suck/expired category, and those will be the ones that we sort of go over first and go over the fastest. So right away, I'm just going to put both Deadpool and Groot in the expired category. Now, Deadpool, it's pretty self-explanatory here. He's gotten multiple uniforms since that one, right? He's gotten the 30th anniversary Deadpool and the April Fool's Deadpool. Now, they've really done everything with Deadpool besides make him good. But the interesting thing is that since the Holiday Party Deadpool, they tried to make him good for PvP. That failed miserably. Then they tried to make him good for PvP and a support for Gwenpool, and that sort of succeeded but still failed miserably because it's just not interesting enough for players to have to bring them both into content, and they also don't work together in World Boss Legend since Gwenpool's not a mutant, so the idea actually kind of failed and fell flat on its face. The devs are kind of up their own ass when it comes to Deadpool these days, but unfortunately this uniform has just been eclipsed by the introduction of Pierce. So this uniform was very good 3 years ago because of all defense down and how that works, and the fact that he has minus 80% on his 5th skill here. However, Pierce basically makes all defense down irrelevant because it just ignores all of the defenses anyways. It's like true damage. So by today's standards, once you get just a little bit of Pierce, all defense down stops working very well. Like, it just doesn't do very much damage. It doesn't really amplify your damage very much. Not to mention, you cannot apply all defense down to World Boss Legends. You cannot apply all defense down to to Dormammu GBR. So all of the game modes now where you would hope to use it, it doesn't apply. So that is why this uniform is just 100% expired. In the case of Groot, this is 100% expired because they just took his best ability, which was to heal people as a striker, and they took it away. And so they were like, we're going to take away Groot's best asset from these uniforms, and then we're just going to give him nothing in return. Wow, brilliant idea here, guys. Really, really good selling point. Take away the character's best use and don't give him anything in return. They gave him obviously a little bit more damage, but his damage sucked by 2020 standards, which is when this uniform came out. It's obviously sucks even harder by 2022 standards. I hope Groot gets a tier 3 for the last Guardians of the Galaxy movie. He probably will, and or like a Transcendence or something, but yeah, this uniform is a massive, massive, massive skip. I skipped this the year that it came out because I was boycotting. I picked it up later just so that I would have every uniform in the game, because otherwise when you go to this thing here, there would be like one more unowned. Right now I only unown I don't own the uniform that no one can own anymore, the Secret Wars Captain Marvel. But yeah, the Groot uniform is just absolutely terrible. So we get those 2 out of the way. Cool. Now we come to the useful and meta category. This one's a little bit tougher, but we'll go through them. At this point in time, with the introduction of Titania, with the introduction of Carnage tier 4 and Namor tier 4, Kingpin has lost his ability to hold the combat villain category all onto his own. He was by far the best combat villain in the game when this uniform was introduced. And they basically gave him 6 months of full reign on that category until, like I said, they introduced Titania, Namor, Carnage, and then he just pushed him out. But yeah, so he's no longer meta, although I would still say he is useful. Some people would argue that he's expired. I'm not going to be that mean. I would say that Kingpin is useful. I'm also not going to say that Magik is totally useless. I genuinely think she is very close to being useless, but we'll put her here for now along with Kingpin in the useful category. And then last but not least, again, I really want to put Gwenpool here in expired, but I am going to put her here, and I'll explain why for one very, very small reason. But yeah, let's just go through these three now here. So in Kingpin's case, he did get a tier 3, and he got this, holiday exclusive uniform. So if you want to make Kingpin good at all, you have to pick up this uniform. However, there are better combat villains. Like I said, there's Namor, there's Titania, there's Carnage. So you can take your pick, whether they're premium characters or non-premium. Any three of those are going to outperform Kingpin at tier 3. And then, of course, Namor and Carnage can go to tier 4. So they are even better. However, Kingpin is still useful if you need a combat villain. He's got a very easy, very proc-friendly rotation, but he can also work with a rage. He's a decent character. Again, he sort of also has the question of, like, how is this a holiday uniform? But, by Kingpin standards, he does have the thugs. He does have the exploding fancy cars and the machine guns. And he beats you with a cane, so that's kind of nice. And he's like a decent DPS. Magik, you guys have probably already heard it, but it seems like Alliance Conquest is the only game mode where she's really gonna shine, and that's really disappointing. At least for Kingpin, there's not that many other combat villains that can compete with him in other content. But with Magik for Blast females, like, we have so many options available, and even for mutants, right? Polaris, Jean, Storm, like, there's just too many options now. So really, what is there to say besides Alliance Conquest? It's very disappointing there. She does have a leadership like Kingpin has. That's pretty much the only other thing you can say. And then for Gwenpool, okay, so otherwise this Gwenpool uniform is useless. She has a better uniform by today's standards, right? She has a better uniform by today's standards. The only reason why you would consider picking up this uniform is if you wanted to cover yourself for the story mode, specifically the All War, because the devs have shown very recently the propensity to be cheeky a-holes and put her in the required characters. And so actually, it wasn't this month, it was last month. Last month they put her as a required character, and of course she doesn't deal any elemental damage at all with any of her other uniforms except this one. With this one, this is a full-on Christmas winter uniform. They actually went with the snow theme, so you can see Snow Bazooka, Snowball Slam, Winter Wonderland, and all of those skills deal cold damage. So because those skills deal cold damage, she can technically be set, and chosen for the All War. So some people think that's really annoying, and so to cover themselves on that so they don't have to put her aside when they're constructing teams, you might want to pick up this uniform. But that's a very, very, very niche reason. Otherwise, there is no other reason to buy this uniform. Let me be clear here. So you could basically call her expired at this point. She just has that one small use. And again, it's not even guaranteed that it's going to come up every month. It did come up last month. I hope it never comes up again, but I just wanted to point it out to you guys so that everybody knows and everybody's clear. And then we come to meta. And meta means that they are competitively good for at least one game mode. So we're going to put White Fox, Black Cat, and Magneto up here. Okay, and I'll do them in that order just because I don't know. Like, in terms of overall strength, obviously it's going to be like this because Black Cat doesn't have tier 3. White Fox only has tier 3, and then Magneto has tier 4. So, like, obviously when you compare them on their own, that's the case. However, Magneto is he's a DPS, right? He's not a support, he's not a lead. Black Cat has a lead and support and an insane artifact. And then White Fox has an insane support passive, and she has a good leadership for some other content. So in terms of, like, their overall usefulness, you could honestly argue that Magneto is not the most useful of the three, especially if he only ends up being meta for ABX and ABL. However, he can go to tier 4, so we're gonna consider that. So with these three rankings now, let's go ahead and look at these characters. In White Fox's case, I think this is probably the easiest recommendation. If you don't have this uniform and you can spend money on the game, I would recommend getting this uniform. It has an absolutely busted passive here with 65 and 30 increase and decrease damage to any ally that has the leadership ability. If you don't know which allies have the leadership ability, you can press the button in the far corner. Nope, not that button. The button in the far corner. No, you press the button at the top there, and then you type in ability, and then you hit the leadership, and you can see all the characters that have leadership, including multiple tier 4s, Thor, Moon Knight, and Captain America. So it already hits a bunch of meta characters with more to come in the future, on top of the fact that then she gives all allies, all hero allies, excuse me, so they don't have to have the leadership. All hero allies get basic attack, 10% chain hit, and 30% ignore dodge. If you apply her passive to a leadership character, she has the best support in the game. The only reason why she's not a better support overall than Valkyrie is because Valkyrie applies all of her buffs to all characters, regardless of whether they're heroes, villains, leadership, not. But if you do hit a leadership character, White Fox is by far the best. So if you have a leadership character that you really like to use for PvE content, even if they're not necessarily the best character, like let's say you just really love using the new Punisher, or you really love using Captain Falcon or Spider-Man, I strongly recommend picking up this uniform for White Fox, because it is very meta. And then if you're still playing World Boss Ultimate, her leadership is amazing for World Boss Ultimate because of the debuff effect, amplifying your all defense down. And then her leadership is also good for Dispatch until you get some level 80s and some tier 4s, because the all defense down is very good for Dispatch still for newer players. So yeah, this is, I think in my opinion, the best winter uniform is White Fox. Honestly, considering all of that, I do think hers is the best. However, you also have Black Cat. Black Cat's, I think, is a little bit more niche. Still can be very good for Dispatch. Still can be very good as a leadership for villains for World Boss Ultimate. But unfortunately, because she can't go past tier 2 yet, she cannot be used in World Boss Legend. She cannot be used in Dormammu GBR, which is really disappointing. You can also use her, however, for ABX and ABL. So that's where I think if you need villain leaderships, like especially if you built up Namor recently, Black Cat pairs really well with him. She pairs really well with Gamora, with Green Goblin, Electro for ABX. Very strong leadership for villain allies, all attack and ignore dodge. But you're probably looking at her and thinking, why don't I just pick up Baron Zemo's uniform? Well, here's the thing with Black Cat. She has that, but then she also has a passive where it amplifies all allies debuff effect, which is just like White Fox's leadership. So she has White Fox's leadership combined, which is broken for things like Dispatch and World Boss Ultimate, where you could apply all defense down. But then on top of that, if you get her hands on her artifact, she has one of the most broken artifacts in the game. All allies get increased damage to heroes, increased damage to villains, and increased damage to boss types. Absolutely nutty. Absolutely nuts passive artifact. The best support artifact in the game. Very strong still. And will only get stronger once she gets a tier 3 or a tier 4 to get even more instinct. So yeah, very strong support character, but like I said, because she can't go past tier 2, it's mainly focused on ABX and ABL, and then a little bit on Dispatch and World Boss Ultimate, so you have to take that into consideration, but still, I think, worth thinking about. And then last but not least, we have Magneto. Like I've said before, and I sort of stand by what I said, I think he is disappointing at level 70, but he's going to be very good at level 80 because all level 80s are good. Surprise, surprise. At tier 4, he may be competitive. We have to sort of wait and see on that. From what I've seen, he seems pretty good at tier 4, but also, you know, there are other options for tier 4, and it's only going to get more crowded, so you have to become more and more picky. You know, saying that every new tier 4 is good is kind of a lie, because they're not, and because you have to compare them just to tier 4s, right? You can't be like, oh wow, Magneto's so much faster than Mephisto. Of course he is. Mephisto's tier 3, right? But if Mephisto had tier 4, he would dust Magneto, you know? Like, so it's tough to compare for sure. But I think you really have to, like, it's got to be level 80 minimum for Magneto. Don't buy this uniform if you don't have Magneto. Don't buy this uniform if you're going to buy Magneto in the future, right? Like, you know, the only thing I would say is if you don't have any uniform for Magneto, if you have Magneto, but you don't have any uniform for him, this is probably like a pretty strong recommend, because it turns the character from useless to useful. At the very least, he'll become useful, and then he has the option to grow even stronger if you then go take him to level 80 or you take him to tier 4. I'm a little bit hard on Magneto. I definitely think that they could have done better for him, but yeah, that's sort of how the breakdown shakes down. So yeah, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of the ranking. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.